We're going to go ahead and get started once I get my clicker fixed. There we go. Thank you. We want to make sure, as in all sessions, that we are in full compliance with FTC antitrust policy. There will be no discussions of pricing, boycotts, or allocation of markets to comply in all aspects of antitrust. Thank you. Now for the fun stuff. Thank you to our education session sponsors, B&W, CMI Orchards, Coast Tropical, Harvest Sensations, and Limeco. Thank you as well to our education session refreshment sponsors, WP Produce by Desbury and Masser Family of Companies. Thank you. Our next speaker knows more about what shoppers are putting in their grocery carts than what most of us know is in our own refrigerators. She's a true voice in grocery retail, food service, and throughout the grower-shipper community. Today, she brings us the 5th annual What's New SEPC's original research. Thank you, and join me in welcoming Anne Marie Rourke, President of 210 Analytics.
All right, thank you. I got my mic. I'm good. I'm mic'd up. All right, good morning. And for all of you still streaming in the room, there's a bunch of seats still over there. But other than that, wow, this is starting to be bigger and bigger, and that is absolutely wonderful. The What's New research is original SEPC research in which we query 1,500 produce consumers about all sorts of new topics. This research really tries to uncover something that helps us look ahead, helps us understand what is down the horizon. This year, the topic actually presented itself because for years we've been seeing fruit outgrowing vegetables, but at the same time, vegetables were still growing. So we never really paid a ton of attention to it. As you guys might have all noticed, as of the beginning of the year, all of a sudden we realized that vegetable sales have been flat to down. So that's when my phone starts to ring and people go, what's happening? Why is this? Why are vegetable sales not as strong as they have been? So that really became the big topic for this session this year, to try to understand what is happening in the marketplace. A lot is happening in the marketplace and has been happening in the marketplace. We had the start of the COVID pandemic in March 2020, and that's when the roller coaster started. It's been nothing but change ever since, from distribution, container ships going 3 times as high as they were. We had all sorts of disruptions in terms of weather. We had all sorts of dollars flowing from food service to retail and back again. And I'm here to tell you that unfortunately or fortunately, because I believe there is always opportunity and change, that roller coaster ride is going to continue. The reason for that is not just the economy, which is still not chugging along the way we would like it, because we all know that's good for business, but there's also something else happening, and that is a seismic demographic shift that has been happening at a glacial speed, but all of a sudden is going to make a gigantic difference in years going forward. First of all, let's look a little bit at that economy, because by all means, we are not out of the woods yet, and what we are seeing is a continued focus on home-prepared meals. Doesn't mean all of restaurants and food services are doing bad. In fact, there is many areas within food service that are growing, and interestingly, it's all about experience. Casual restaurants are doing better than fast food. Fine dining is actually growing. But what life has become, whether in retail or in food service, is one long balancing act. And here is consumers talking a little bit about prices and retail versus food service. Oh, we need the sound.
And a fun meal. But recently, it was my birthday, we did splurge, and we went to Melting Pot. So I think it depends on what the occasion is.
I've had to rework my budget a little bit to put more towards the groceries and less towards the dining out or the going out. I'll still go and hang out at the restaurant if my friends are there, but I'll have my meal prepped meal before I get there, and maybe I'll buy a snack, but I try to eat at home mostly now.
It feels easier for me to go to Chipotle and spend $11 on a bowl and get through the night than to go to the grocery store and drop $60 on 3 days worth of groceries.
I cook a lot more at home now. It's crazy what we pay for just, sandwiches and a drink.
I cook a lot more these days. We have minimal meals, actually.
Affected. Instead of going out to eat, I'll invite someone over.
It's cheaper to meal yourself. We have a busy schedule, it's hard. Sometimes it's easier to just grab on the go.
Tonight I'm gonna eat cereal before I go to my next thing, so I try to just balance it.
Balance it. That is a word that we hear a lot of consumers talk about. So in other words, they are still going to food service, but it is more planned, it is more experience driven, and that means a lot of the dollars are coming into retail. Does that mean retail is absolutely thriving and people are spending just as they wish at retail? No, we're seeing a lot of changes there as well. There is a huge focus on minimizing food waste. In part, it has everything to do with sustainability, as we just heard about, but in part, it has everything to do too with simply not having the ability to lose money on food and not eat it. So there's a huge focus on freshness, a huge focus on eating every dollar that you're spending. We're seeing a huge focus on store brands, and depending on the commodity, we're seeing that in produce as well. We're also seeing a big focus on planning and sales promotions. So what can we do about that? Here are some pictures out of the marketplace. If you think about people not wanting to waste food, that in our category means an enormous focus on freshness. Here are some examples out of the European markets where two retailers say, hey, you know, every 2 hours we check our produce set for freshness. Or a little sign that shows we last checked for ultimate freshness to make sure you have the best produce possible, and here is the time in which we did it. Oftentimes, retailers have a guaranteed money back sort of slogan on the wall. Sometimes it's even 2 times the money back. Well, here is a retailer that says you don't even need to come back to the store. You can just use our app in case you find that avocado in lesser shape than you would have wished. But more than anything, what we are seeing is shoppers are cherry picking promotions. They are feverishly looking for sales deals that are out there. 51% checks promotions at their main store. A third of Americans checks across different stores. And that means constantly bringing attention to the value of fresh produce is incredibly important. It's not always about price. It truly is about value. All these market dynamics have resulted in a flurry of trips to the store. We have never seen consumers shop for groceries as often as we have today. 86 times they have purchased fresh produce over the past year. That's up 3%. The interesting thing about that is total store is up 4.5%. So produce is not quite keeping up with the increase in trips. Instead, when they are purchasing produce, they are not purchasing as much. And that is something I keep hearing from all of you guys, retailers, right? How do we get that extra unit in the basket? Because people are very focused on picking our promotions and buying exactly what they need. All of that has resulted in an okay year for produce, but there are certainly departments that are growing faster. And as I mentioned, we're starting to really see a slowdown as of the beginning of the year. Now that slowdown is also resulting in very different numbers by region, and it's also showing very different numbers by channel. Some of you might say, hey, I look at those numbers and I double them. Absolutely, there's regions, especially following migration patterns of the population, that are doing great. There's also channels that are doing great. If you look at the mass and supercenter channel, club and online, they are outgrowing the average and they're gaining share. Full-service supermarkets are losing share. Now, when you overlay that with some of the demographic patterns that are happening, that's our first look at the fact that millennials are driving a lot of change, and there's a reason why these ladies up here behind me. Now, as I alluded, we didn't really need to dig hard for the topic of this year, and that was the very, very different performance between fruit and vegetables. Fruit is chugging along, growing 6% in dollars due to inflation and demand growth. Look at that, 3.6% volume growth over a year ago. This is year to date. And on the flip side, you see a little bit of pressure for vegetables. And they've always been in balance, but we're no longer seeing that balance. The question is why? Is it the marketplace? No, that doesn't make any sense because vegetables are cheaper and they're deflating. fruit is more expensive and it's inflating. So if it were just that value that people are looking for, it doesn't make sense. So we have to dig deeper. And that means we got to look at the shopper themselves. And when we look at the shopper themselves, there is a who is driving sales today, who is driving sales tomorrow, and how different is that shopper of tomorrow. So let's look at that. If we look at all dollars spent in produce, we can divide those up across the different generation. Gen Z under age 25 is still only about 2% of total produce spending. You look at millennials, Gen X, and boomers, and they're all about a third. Some of you might be surprised to see that boomers are still the majority spender in the produce department today. Now, when you divide that up between fruit and vegetables, you're already starting to see a trend. And that is Gen Z and millennials have a above average share in fruit, but a below average share in vegetables that were really driven by Gen X, boomers, and the silent generation. So now let's take a look at growth. Because if you look at the growth in dollars and units and understand where that growth is coming from, we can start to look into the future. That's when we're seeing a very, very different picture. All the growth, so all those new dollars in the produce department, by and large, are driven by the younger generations. We actually see on the vegetable side that boomers are now pulling back on total vegetables, so we have reached a plateau and are starting to come down, whereas a lot of the growth is driven by Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X. Now look at that growth rate for millennials between vegetables and fruit. And you see that fruit is growing at almost twice the rate of vegetables, and that is an important clue. Put in a different way, if we look at all the new dollars and all the new units and say what generation is responsible for what share of that newness, you see that millennials account for almost 70% of all new dollars and all new units. And that means we have to start paying attention to how different that millennial shopper is, because we have catered to the boomer generation for 30 years. We know them. They love routine meals. If I do the forecasting for a category like mushrooms, I can usually get within 0.5% by week because it's such a routine purchase. Millennials are much more impulsive. They're much more about convenience or maybe something that sparked their eye on social media. So a lot of these things are going to change. If we just look at today's forecast rates and we just use today's growth rates to forecast the next 5 years, we are going to go from a boomer majority share today. Within 2 years, millennials are going to dominate produce spending. Within 5 years, they are truly dominating produce spending, 39% of total dollars. 10 years ago, we had one millennial session after another. Then we all kind of got sick of hearing about the millennial. Well, I'm telling you, the millennial is back, and we better start paying attention with Gen Z right on their heels. I think there's going to be a lot more spending happening there. So this was just based on today's growth rates. But if you think about the fact that millennials are coming into their career potentials, a lot of increases in total income as they're combining income, as they're growing in their career, but also growing in their average household size, as many millennials, especially the older group of millennials, has kids. In fact, the older millennials are starting to have teenagers, and those of you who had teenagers in your household all know what that means, and I cannot say it any better than this lady right here.
What are we going to do about the food situation? What are we doing about the 10 stomachs that they've grown since school has ended? And I'll ask my son, I'm like, what do you want for lunch? And I'm thinking he's gonna say, why, chicken fries, mac and cheese. He wants steak and rice. That's dinner. You don't eat these dino nuggets and get up out of my face. Cause I done made breakfast, second breakfast, snack, lunch, second lunch, snack. He's just eating.
And that's what we need to take advantage of in the produce department. All right, so what does that mean? As I alluded, millennials really have a completely different way of approaching our category, and that means we have 360 degrees of change coming at us. We are going to see different ways in which they find inspiration, and we're going to look at all of this in the rest of the presentation. They buy different items if you think about all the variety we have in the produce department. They have very different values. There's a lot more focus on things like fair trade, sustainability, what have you. There's a huge different approach to where I am buying. We looked earlier at the channel shares. That by and large is driven by the millennial. And of course, we're gonna see very different meals being made as well. And again, all that information is gonna come at you. But now it is time for you guys to be your own panel. We had a fantastic panel up here today, this morning. This session, I'm gonna be coming on and off, presenting you with information. This is your time to grab everybody around the room, around the table, and talk about what we just learned for about 10 minutes, and then I'll call you guys back to order and we'll go to topic number 2. I put a couple of questions here up on the slide. You don't have to talk about just that, but have some fun, talk to your table mates, and if you just have a few people at your table, maybe combine, and I'll be back in 10 minutes. Have fun. All right, we are going to move, and it's so hard hearing all of you guys talk, but we got so many good things to share. So this is awesome, though. Full room, everybody chatting. Folks in the back, there's still some seats over here. So let's move on. That was very loud, to our next topic, as I promised. The reason why these ladies are up here is because the whole rest of the session is about how are boomers different from millennials, because that allows us to understand what our future might look like. Well, of course, it all starts with consumption. The yellow bar is adults, fruits, and veggies combined. Your red bar is kids' consumption of fruit. Your green bar is kids' consumption of vegetables. As you can see, the fruit and the adults are very, very similar. But I'll zoom in a little bit more here. The green bar is far lower. In other words, what we are seeing is kids today are far less engaged with vegetables. Now, of course, that is a lot of different consumption occasions throughout the day, all combined. So let's have a look specific to children's engagement with fruits and vegetables and how different that is throughout the day. You see a huge gap for fruit versus vegetables for breakfast, so that's where it all starts. If you look at those kids who consume fruit and vegetables more than 4 times a week, they start more than anything with fresh produce right in the morning time. Lunch is fairly similar. A lot of us, of course, a lot of the kids eat school lunch. Then you look at dinner. That's really the only occasion where vegetables come out on top. But we have, of course, a dessert, fruit for dessert. That's where fruit wins. And look at that snack difference as well, where we continue to have a lot more engagement with snacks, with fruit during the snack occasion than we see in terms of vegetables. So, conclusion number 1, there's a lot of opportunity throughout the day. How can we really focus in on getting fruit into breakfast, getting fruit into snacking? Well, oftentimes it comes down to ideation in the store. So this is a great example by Hannaford over here. Down below, a great example by Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, where a lot of the snack ready or just simply reminding parents how easy it is to put fruit and vegetables into lunch as well. A little fork. All the packaging can be a lot different and all of a sudden turn into a snacking occasion. Now, Harold will probably give me a tomato lecture afterwards, but these tomatoes were merchandised right next to each other. In my not tomato sophisticated mind, these tomatoes are exactly the same. One is in what I would put in my refrigerator at home. The others are washed ready in a little cup that I can put in my cup holder. In other words, it is the packaging that makes the difference in the snacking occasion or versus when I use it at home or in the car. The bottom line of consumption, whether I look at tortillas or tomatoes or vegetables in general, always comes down to 3 things. Number 1 is how many consumption occasions. We saw that earlier, right, where we compared snacks and dinner and lunch and all these different things. Number 2 is always, what am I doing with this? I call that the Forrest Gump shrimp effect, right? The more ways in which you can think about what you're going to do with an apple or with a potato, what have you, the more different ways in which you prepare a fruit or vegetable or eat it, the more often people tend to eat more, or consume more. The last one is the variety of fruit and vegetables. We're humans. We don't want to eat the same thing all the time. So the more variety we can get into shoppers' baskets, the more likely they are to eat more fruit and vegetables and eat it more often. So that we really have to understand what is that millennial pattern versus the boomer pattern. And if people are picky or they're out of time or out of money, what can we do to drive trial and engagement anyway? So that's what we're going to look at here. And of course, as we all know, not everybody loves us as much as they should. Looking into that purple box first, that is the adults, boomers versus millennials. And already we see that millennials are a little bit pickier when it comes to fruit and vegetables than their boomer parent or grandparents. That's already an interesting finding. Well, then it turns out that a pickier parent also creates a pickier child. Our scale was, it's a daily struggle of refusal and dislike. They like some, but they're a little bit picky, or they enjoy most fruit. This is the kids. 60% of parents say their kids enjoy most fruits. 45% say their kids enjoy most vegetables. That's huge, right? Less than half enjoy all vegetables. So how do we drive trial anyway? Well, first of all, we have parents on our side. Parents try very hard to get their kids to consume more fresh produce. All the time, sometimes on and off, and they apply a wide variety of ways in which they're trying to get their kids to eat fresh produce more often. And guess who can come look out like an absolute hero if we can be the helping hand to this parent working with their children, whether that is an involvement of the kid to pick the items that they like, whether that is preparing it in a different way. Texture is huge. We'll look at that in a couple of other slides. Hiding it, blending it, we all have done that, right? Chop those onions and mushrooms up as finely as possible and sticking them in ground beef and see if that flies. Renaming vegetables, I've certainly done that in my household. Cauliflower is called snow broccoli and was for many years, until I went to Fresh Market with my kids and they looked at a yellow and a purple one and they got this questionable look on their face. Well, what is these? Which became spring and fall broccoli. But many, many different ways in which parents are trying to engage with their children. But there's also many parents who will adjust what they purchase for their children. On the fruit side, about 22% of parents say, I buy different fruits for my child than I do for myself. We followed up with a question, well, what is the difference? As you can see, bananas, strawberries, really, really big. But another word that is on there is the word organic. There's a lot of parents who engage with the organic category once they have children. And when we overlay some of those numbers and look at the actual sales numbers to see if this is something consumers say, but not necessarily what consumers do, as you can see, a lot of these numbers are actually playing out on the sales floor as well. If you look at bananas, yes, organic bananas are only about 15% of total sales, so conventional bananas cement the category. But if you look at growth, you see that conventional volume is up about 2%, organic volume is up 17%. So a lot of these numbers are playing out in the department. Now let's move to vegetables, and that's where we're starting to see some really big clues as to why vegetables are not doing as well as fruit. 20% of parents say they virtually always adapt their meals for their children, either by removing or substituting the vegetable in the meal. Another 52% do so sometimes. In fact, it can get to the point where maybe just one person in the household likes a certain vegetables and the entire household becomes a no offending vegetable household. That's dangerous, right? How can we make sure that we figure out different textures, different ways in which we can engage that household anyway? We see answers like, hey, he won't eat any vegetables, so he gets fruit, like grape and berries. My kids refuse to eat eggplant, so I swap them out for sweet corn, Brussels sprouts too, on the no-no list of kids. I always take out onions for them and my husband, my third kid. So we see a lot of substitution. What can we do as a produce industry to figure out different ways of preparation, to figure out to be a helping hand to parents to get those items into their children as well. Always keeping in mind that variety is one of the 3 ways in which we can create a better shopper. So again, let's look at whether or not this is actually playing out in the sales numbers. If you think about it, a household with children tends to be a larger household. So compared to a household with just 1 or 2 people, a household with children should be an over-indexing household. And we're seeing that on the fruit side. So what an index is, if let's just say parents are 30% of the population, then they should also be 30% of spending. So if they're more than 30% of spending, the index goes higher, and we get pretty excited when an index goes over 110. So as you can see, for fruit, households with children far over-index for buying fruit. But on the vegetable side, it doesn't really matter whether kids are there. So we're seeing the impact of children for fruit, we're not seeing it for vegetables. So the survey results are exactly echoed in this section in terms of sales as well. So how can we drive trial? Well, even though millennials might be a little bit pickier, they love trying new cuisines, especially global cuisines. They're also not the best cooks in the world still, even though that's getting much better. So what can we do in terms of providing recipes and ways and tips and maybe convenience items? As you can see, they are very, very focused on hybrid meals where they combine some of their own cooking with semi and fully prepared items that were made in the store. Doing their part for the planet, huge difference in sustainability. So all these different ways will come out in a very different section in terms of what people buy, where they buy, and how often they purchase it. The inspiration is completely different. If you look at the top of boomers in the purple box, routine meals, as I mentioned earlier, we can all be very accurate in our forecasting because our majority shopper has been the boomer. It's a routine kind of shopper. Friends and family are big. Recipe websites are big. But in terms of millennials, it is a very digitally inspired food journey. It is YouTube, it is Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, which means we have to inspire inside the store and execute to perfection there, but certainly also inspire digitally. Here's a great example of a new usage occasion in the United Kingdom. During the Wimbledon tennis tournament, everything is about strawberries and cream. Well, M&S came up with the UK's sweetest strawberry named the Red Diamond, and rather than just serving it as a strawberry, they came up with a sandwich that was a little strawberry and cream sandwich. That thing went so viral that they were absolutely depleted in every store. People had a whole treasure hunt going, trying to find this. And who would have ever thought about creating a sandwich like this for the food service program? In fact, Aldi in the UK was so jealous, they came up with their own version just to spoof this sandwich a little bit. And that's when you know you got it made. Mandarins are the latest social media successes. And we talked earlier about changing textures. Listen to what this mom is doing.
The next time you have some peelable mandarins, freeze them. Then hold them under warm water for about 30 seconds. And now, being very careful, we're gonna chop them in half. Now you should be able to pop these right out. And they're, oh my God. It's just like a fresh fruit slushy. Toes, come try this. And bite it.
Oh gosh. It's actually...
It was like a slushy.
It's good.
Thumbs up from the kid, right? That's what we want. So texture is a huge thing in today's environment, as is pop culture moments. Gen Z and millennials love pop culture moments. Taylor Swift came out with her 12th album on 8/12, and the big clue in it was glitter orange. Look what Aldi did. All about the glitter. We had several other retailers, whether it was Walmart, H-E-B, Dunkin', us yesterday, us today, and this is the kind of moment that we can shine in, because if anybody owns the color orange, it would be the produce department. Now, different inspiration, different meals. We ask consumers, what is your all-time favorite meal? We see pizza on top and boomers. We see steak. We see pizza as well. But when you take out the really, really big answers and you start to focus in a little bit on the ones that are smaller, you start to realize certain trends. Trend number one is global cuisine is huge among Gen Z and millennials. We see a lot of Latin American, Mexican, so among the boomers you see the word tacos, but among the millennials and Gen Z you see much more specific items, whether that's enchiladas, birria, fajitas, you name it. Evolved Asian cuisine, so instead of just American Chinese food, it is Japanese, it's Korean, it's Vietnamese, it is all sorts of curries. How can vegetables and fruit be repositioned to fit into these new global cuisines? When we ask about the different recipes that people are interested in, you also see completely different interest levels. And again, this plays into all the inspiration you provide in the store, online, on the menu as well, where does it need to go? Well, look at, for instance, the difference between fast prep in boomers versus millennials. Look at the difference in interest for lunchbox items, for global foods. In other words, we're going to see a vastly different approach to not only what people buy, but also what are they making with it. Couple of switch up recipe ideas here. Here's Albert Heijn in the Netherlands. They have a vegetable of the week. In this case, it was cucumbers, a very mature category, yet everywhere you went where cucumbers were merchandised, you saw different kinds of recipes to work with it. And also they talked about the crispness of cucumber. Crisp is a huge trend across all foods. If you think about candy, it is freeze-dried candy. If you think about the big winners in produce, it is the snappy grapes, the crispy apples. So think about texture as well, and how can you reframe your item from a texture perspective. Around the world, lots of focus on global foods, in especially prepared foods. The one on the left over here is a set, which is a stir fry across all sorts of different things. So you can pick different pastas, you can pick different sauces, different meats, what have you. Flexibility is a huge pro for anybody looking for a quick meal on the go. For another really good example is Mellow Mushroom. A couple of years ago, it was all about their vegan and vegetarian pizza. Now it's about Taco Nirvana pizza. At the end of the day, it's the same ingredients, it's just reformulated with as much of the blending as is happening. Here you see some examples of changing texture. Here's a retailer saying, hey, if you use a wok to grill your veggies, it's crunchier and has a different texture. Or reminding people that corn can not only go on the grill, but also in the oven. Or creating fun different ways in which kids can engage with fruit. Here's another different idea for potatoes, having kids have some fun with preparing their own baking potatoes. So many, many different ideas, and it's back over to you, and I'll be back up here in about 10 minutes. All right, folks, time flies when you're having fun, right? But unbelievably, 10 minutes have passed already. So wrap up the conversations and I'll get us into our third topic, and that's the need for speed. We all remember when we were parents, or if we're parents right now, life is insane. It just seems that everywhere you'd go, every single day, either a meeting ran long, traffic was extra heavy, we're running kids to various sports practices, and it seems there's never enough time in the day. We saw earlier millennials really focusing in on those recipes that are quick prep. Well, we're also seeing it in our competition. Now, if we think about produce, we've always thought about a competition as fresh, frozen, and canned. In reality, the competition that is growing is very different. It's competition in supplements that pretend that they have the exact same vitamins and nutrients and benefits of fresh produce. It's produce-based beverages, bars that say, hey, I include 4 mangoes or 5 bananas. It's those squeeze pouches, it is shots, all sorts of different things. So those are growing all together, but when you look at the engagement of boomers versus millennials, you betcha that's going to be a continued growth area going forward. Now, the question becomes, is that just something that millennials and others who buy these items purchase in addition to fresh produce in order to have more vitamins and more nutrients coming into their diet? Or is it starting to cut into fresh produce? Well, the answer is a little bit of both. At the very, very top, they say it makes it absolutely easier for me to eat more produce. But if you look a little bit further down, they're also leveraging these kinds of items as a way to address produce consumption in between trips when fresh runs out, as well as sometimes replacing fresh fruit and vegetables. Now, there's 2 ways to go about it. We can either see it as consumption and try to get back that consumption occasion, and that really goes down to the convenience that these items bring, as well as they do a tremendous job in highlighting the nutrients in much better ways than we do in fresh. In part, that is, they have packaging. They can do all that. In part, they have different laws in terms of what they can put on their items versus fresh. But we also see endless innovation in those areas. There's freeze-dried broccoli, talking about the difference in texture. There is Brussels sprouts and rice chips. There are chocolate-covered mangoes. So you see all sorts of beverages. You see wraps with 35% carrot content. All of those things we can either see as competition and try to do better, but we can also lean into them, and that's what I'm seeing more and more retailers do. The fresh market, for instance, integrate a lot of those veggie chips right into the produce department. In the middle, you see Coles in Australia, where they have a whole section of veggie powders right in the produce department. But when you zoom in a little bit on that red call out, it actually is items that would have gone to waste otherwise. And so they are repositioning it as a supplement in the produce department that reduces food waste. And guess who is really focused on reducing food waste? Smoothies is another way in which we, as retailers, as restaurants, can bring produce to consumers in different ways. Now, the other way, the other need for speed, of course, comes down to value added. 57% of consumers say they sometimes or frequently purchase value-added items, and that tends to be a lot more popular among millennials and Gen Z than boomers. We see the same in meat, we see the same in seafood. It is something that millennials are turning toward. But at the same time, it is a convenience factor that weighs against price and weighs against food waste. If you think about it, the minute you cut a fruit or vegetable, they tend to have a less long shelf life, and that goes against that rule number one where consumers say, we want to reduce waste and eat every dollar that we're spending. So if you look at the performance of value-added produce over the last couple of years, you see that there is growth in dollars, but the volume has been fairly flat. Now, it depends a little bit on the category, but if I look at something like mushrooms, for instance, we do see that whole mushrooms are outpacing sliced. So it does depend a little bit, and consumers are definitely weighing that little bit of extra money and the shelf life issue against buying it whole and doing the work themselves. At the same time, I would also argue that we're seeing value-added dollars leak to the deli department. If you look in deli, there's the prepared salads that are absolutely on fire. We see things like corn salad sides. We see all these meal kits that are ready to go. So some of the vegetable dollars certainly, and some of the fruit dollars are moving to that deli prepared department, and that's where we are seeing strength. Now, keeping in mind that millennials love their global cuisines and have a very different way of approaching a meal, we ran different types of scenarios by them for value-added produce. We said, how about an Oriental stir-fry kit? Look at the difference in interest for that in boomers versus millennials. Taco night, pasta night, pizza, fruit and veggie kit, all of them much higher interest. This is our license to have some fun with value added and to bring in different combinations and to really make that global cuisine outlook that millennials and Gen Z look into more accessible to the younger consumers. That also, of course, is an ease of shopping. That's another way in which we can bring convenience. Consumers love the ideal of meal display where all the items for tonight's dinner are put together. Again, look at the difference in the interest for meal displays in boomers versus millennials. Now, that takes labor, that takes upkeep. It's not always easy to do, but boy, if we can figure out how to get all these items in the same location, all into the cart, whether that's online or in store, think about what that would do for the average number of units in the car. Meal displays like that could prompt an impulse purchase. It could prompt trials. So this is really a great opportunity for us to get consumers to engage with something new, keeping that variety in mind. If we think about all the value-added items we have in meat and the value-added items we have in produce, how about we put it all together? Or put potatoes with steak, or put limes with beer, or whatever it might be. These are great ways to engage consumers. And while they've already gone to the produce department, find produce in other parts of the store. We've all known the success of bananas with cereal or potatoes with steak. Those are the ways in which consumers tend to shop And if you think about how different millennials are, what can you do to bring fruit and vegetables in the way that they shop and they co-purchase items? Now, interest levels go up even more when we talk about displays that address holiday meals. A lot of the retailers in the room, you make holiday sets for occasions like Thanksgiving or Christmas, but what are some other opportunities, whether that's St. Patrick's Day or Super Bowl, what have you, because this is a way in which we can inspire people to not only buy all the items, but also maybe try something new. So understanding the classics for each season is a great way to leverage these holiday sets. Being in Denmark, this was the best cross-store execution I've ever seen. This is basically summer vibes. And whether it was in the produce department or the meat department or the deli sides, they even had a picnic set. Everything was branded the same way for this entire summer vibe kind of approach to getting consumers excited about one extra grilling occasion or one extra summer occasion. There's always something to celebrate, whether that is summer. Look at what Publix is doing over here. They are all looking into various ways in which we can bring sweet heat as summer is here. The video isn't playing, but that's all right. We have Chinese New Year. We have so many different things that we can think about throughout the course of a year. So this is a shorter segment. Gonna give you 10 minutes. Think a little bit about what can we do to lean in our cross-merchandising, self-invented holidays, have some fun. All right, everybody. Time just goes by super fast, but believe it or not, that was another 10 minutes, and we are going into our last section of the day. So after that, we're going to come back 10 more minutes, and then Hillary is going to join me on stage for a couple of more announcements. So health and well-being, well, you know, that's a space we used to own 20 years ago. You would ask anybody, what is healthful eating? And the answer would have been fruit and vegetables. Today, let's hear from consumers what they have to say about that.
Nothing deep fried, whole grains, protein.
Organics, that's always comes to mind.
A balanced meal with kind of all of the food groups that they teach you in school, like your meats and veggies and dairy.
Home cooked, low ingredient meals.
Yeah, not eating out, simple ingredients.
And fruit and vegetables and a lower level of carbs.
Vegetables, green vegetables like broccoli, peas, carrots, those aren't green, but they come to mind. Salad, chicken, lean chicken, white meat, yeah.
Do heavy protein and veggies.
Minimally processed foods, as like whole as you can get your foods.
Fruits, vegetables, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, now protein is, you know, that's what you hear about. How can you get your 30 grams of protein per meal?
Mine immediately are like eating like lots of like vegetables and like fruits, like having a well kind of like balanced diet.
Vegetables, green, celery, lettuce, spinach, kale.
So fresh stuff, fruits, vegetables, meats, the dairy aisle, fresh stuff.
We still own a lot of mind space as it relates to healthful, but we're seeing all sorts of other descriptions come in, right? Protein was mentioned a whole bunch of times, maybe home cooked instead of eating out, minimal items, minimally processed. So that to me is a huge call to action, because guess what? All those descriptions also fit the produce department, but a lot of the messaging has been taken away from us. So going back to our overall health halo, as well as leaning into what are those specific nutrients that consumers are looking for, and guess what? Our fruit and vegetables deliver a lot of those. In terms of exactly what consumers are leaning into, it's really overall wellness. If you go 10 years ago, there was a lot of no-no type of attitudes toward eating. We wanted no fat, low fat, no carbs, all sorts of different things. But in today's world, that overall general wellness is coming back very strong. And then you see very specific type of diets, whether that's gut health or immunity support, bone health, cognitive health, what have you. So that is something, if you look at the list between millennials and boomers, a lot of millennials are looking for those very specific benefits, and that's a huge opportunity for us. It's very, very important for us not to get lost in all those big protein hype diets. The magazine here on the left really caught my eye. Anything that was about healthful eating in the past would have had fruit and veggies on the front. Now you see a dish that, yes, still has vegetables on it, but it's very meat forward. If you think about a low carb diet, oftentimes people think about meat and think about vegetables. So if you think about deli prepared or anything in the produce department, what can you do to remind people that many of the items in the produce department are by nature low carb, have protein? A lot of consumers have no idea that there are vegetables that do have protein. So in terms of how do people want to see their nutrients call out and what do they want to see called out, well, take 90% of people who say, yeah, I would love to learn more. Vitamin C is really what we're known for in the produce department, but look at some of the other nutrients that they are looking for. Vitamin D, B, protein, what have you. And as far as the consumer is concerned, we don't need to get super, super technical about that. More than anything, they want to know what is the nutrient and what does it do for me. In other words, if you look at some of these examples, you see avocados not necessarily calling out the exact nutrient, but simply saying it's good for cholesterol levels, or calling out the nutrients if there are a bunch of different ones to boast about. Hannaford talking about just little tips that are spread out throughout the department to remind people about not all the overall wellness of produce, but certainly also very specific benefits. Nutri-Score reasons, we're seeing that all over Europe, and those are the types of things that are starting to come into our marketplace as well. Consumers are looking for information, whether it's health and wellness and sustainability. We heard a lot about that this morning. Sustainability is simply good business. That's what a lot of retailers are agreeing about, and sustainability is not just good for the planet, it's also good for the community, good for me, and really that total focus, that holistic focus on sustainability is what we're starting to see popping up more and more across retailers as well as restaurants. Consumers want to know more about their foods, especially millennials. And that is true whether they are at retail or whether they are at food service. As you can see, if we simply compare the numbers of 2022 to the numbers seen in 2025, the hunger for information, not only about what does the food do for me, but what does the food do to the planet, the farmer, what have you, is becoming more and more important. Here are some examples of brands and retailers calling out all sorts of different ways in which consumers can learn more, whether that is QR codes, a little bit of information on the package. That package I discovered, I believe it was in Sweden, that has more information on it than I have ever seen, but it really solidifies their go-to-market strategy, even if it is a little much. My big point here is oftentimes as an industry, and we're guilty of this in produce and meat and bakery, what have you, we have jargon terms that we use that really describe our production. Regenerative agriculture is one of them. I asked consumers specific to meat, I wanted to pick on a different industry than us, what does it mean if the word regenerative is on a beef package? Now, just so the audience here knows, what it means is that animal agriculture that leaves the soil better than it was, that focuses on biodiversity. Let's listen to what consumers believe regenerative means.
I feel like that's the name for the lab-grown meat, maybe?
It's just something that's beefing up the beef or so, like making the cows bigger or something like that, maybe.
I don't know what that means. Is that plant-based meat?
That sounds like a zombie beef. So I'm gonna assume like it's one of those like, it's a really nice way of saying that it's been grown in a lab.
That I've not heard of, so.
I have not heard of that, and if I did, I think I'd run away from it
Yeah.
if I saw it on a label.
It sounds awful. It sounds like, when you cut the tail off of a snake and it just regenerates.
I don't know. That makes me think the beef is like growing itself.
But my guess would be regenerative is reused, I guess, beef.
It sounds not good. It sounds like they cut a leg off and it grows back.
Like you can't butcher a cow until it's bred or something, so that it at least has like offspring.
Painful, right? Regenerative is a beautiful thing, whether it is animal agriculture or it is fruit and vegetables. But if we use terms that are not understood by the consumer, not only do we not get the benefit, they might actually believe that's something they would run away from very quickly. So this is the best example I can give you to say, speak consumer. All right, in terms of our various production claims, we continue to see a lot of focus on grown in the USA, grown locally. I will absolutely say that at the end of the day, it comes down more to telling the story of how it was grown than exactly where, if it is an item that can simply not be grown locally or in the US. But we see a lot of focus among regenerative agriculture, among millennials, organics among millennials. And as local continues to be a popular strategy, I thought the picture there on your right was interesting, where it just simply says, hey, we can't grow cherries here, but they got here as fast as they could. So there is still a lot of humor that you can use for sure in order to focus on freshness, on a local, or on sourcing simply the best tasting produce. Because at the end of the day, taste is always going to win over anything else. But we have a big opportunity to inform, and again, do so in consumer language, whether that is water for all, did you know type of language, or simply talking about avocados that are doing good. Any type of information we can give them becomes a cherry on top to be willing to spend a little bit more. And at the end of the day, if we think about the ways in which we can grow the produce category, it is more people buy more often, or they spend a little bit more. So the more information about health, about sustainability, about the types of ideas that you see here on the screen, those are all ways in which we can help grow our category. Organic has been an exciting area within the produce department. We saw the example of bananas a little bit earlier. We continue to see an increase in the number of people who buy organic. Now, for most of them, it doesn't tend to be all the time. They tend to have certain categories where they like to buy organic, maybe when it is on sale. But if you look at the difference in the organic attitude between boomers and millennials, I think it's pretty safe to say we're going to continue to see some growth there. Organic in most commodities has been outgrowing conventional. There's been really good pound growth on the fruit and the vegetable side, and we're now up to about 12% of total produce dollars and about 8% of total produce volume sales. So if you think about organic, we also think about food waste and package waste in the total realm of sustainability. And we continue to see that that idea of food waste is important. We talked earlier about consumers really focusing on buying just as much as they need, not having to go to waste, focusing on freshness. Well, there is certainly that economic side of it, but there is also a huge social side to it. I have vegetables that go bad, I have fruit that goes bad. And interesting, if you look at boomers and millennials, they seem to struggle with using vegetables up before they go bad. But tips about how to ripen things at home, indicating in the store how ripe things are they to eat today or to eat tomorrow? Those are all ways in which we can work with the consumer. If we think about packaging waste, that's another huge area, right? A lot of people recognize that we use packaging in order to protect the product. But at the same time, millennials especially say, you know what, we understand there is a functional side to it, but can you figure out how to balance it with the environmental impact side as well? Certainly walking around Europe and more here in the US as well, we're seeing packaging innovations, really focusing on less plastic or a different way of packaging it that extends the shelf life. If you do that, make sure you take the credit. A lot of you always say, well, but we're not doing it for the sake of credit. But guess what? If it's important to that millennial consumer, we can make them feel better about the product. So it is something that matters to them. It is something that we need to point out to them. A lot of you in retail have started to use glass or refrigerators with glass doors, right? Here's a retailer that is calling out the amount of energy that they are saving by using the glass doors. Now, I don't know if comparing to a number of hours ironing is the best way to do that, but it's interesting that they're trying to slap a number on the energy savings used from refrigerating with doors. Everything from whether it is reducing food waste initiatives at retail, in the restaurant, those things are very important. All right, so this is going to be your last 10-minute session. I'll wrap you guys up, and then Hillary has a couple more comments at the end. Have fun. All right, everybody. Who thought an hour and a half could fly by like that? So, to wrap it all up, as I mentioned, I don't think the marketplace change is going to be over anytime soon. We're all dealing with the tariffs and continued issues like moving the dollars between retail and food service as consumers are in that big balancing act, as we saw earlier. There is still not the kind of economic recovery that we're looking to see, and that means that consumers continue to be highly focused on things like sales promotions, freshness, making sure they get to eat every dollar that they're spending. But certainly, as hopefully we made it very, very clear, and these ladies continue to illustrate, that idea of the millennial growth going to drastically change what, where, and how people are purchasing fruit and vegetables. I think that was the big message of today, and you guys were just chattering away, so hopefully there was a lot of excitement there. Download your copy. Many of you were taking pictures, but rest assured, this is only a little bit of all the slides that are developed. It's a long survey. You can download this presentation deck. You can also download the longer deck. If you can't find it, the QR code isn't working for me, just shoot me an email or shoot Anna an email at education@producecouncil.com. We're going to put out a lot of information on LinkedIn and any other which way. Here is the SEPC University resource site, and I'm going to ask Hillary to join me back on stage to wrap it back up.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Was that not incredible? I mean, she is, thank you. We are so lucky at SEPC to have her, and we've all been to tons of conferences, and this is truly one of the best sessions in our industry. At SEPC, this conference, I just want to take this moment to remind everyone it's Southern Innovations, and that's what we do every fall, is we try to innovate, bring you something new, and it was incredible. We saw so many people getting their phones out. I think I received like 6 text messages within the first 5 minutes. Can you send me this deck? I need to have this. Here's your QR code. We are going to break at 11. You have 30 minutes before the 2 lunches start. So the men, you will go over for the good seats. You will actually go back to the JW. You will take the elevator up to the 3rd floor, which is the JW Grand Ballroom. The women, we have it a little bit easier. We are right next door. So those lunches will start at 11:30. We look forward to seeing you all tonight at the Chairman's Dinner Dance. Thank you.
Huh?